Thank you, and welcome back to God First. All lessons are based on the sermons of Reverend Young Peck. Today, we look to take control of our lives. Let's start. We face life-changing events that are bigger than us. We face pandemics, personal tragedies, and unforeseen events. Many times we feel helpless in the face of things that seem bigger and stronger than us. We can resign ourselves to accept a life where we control nothing, or we can take control of our lives. Instead of focusing on the things we can't control and complain to God about the futility of it all, we can take control by thinking of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. Let's take a look at 5 things we can do right now to take back our lives. 1. The Lord took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden. The very situation we are living in right now is our Garden of Eden. Of all the places in the world, God placed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Everything they needed to thrive existed in the garden. Wherever you find yourself in life, God placed you at those exact coordinates. You are not there by accident or there by a sequence of random events. God has put you in the exact situation you find yourself in. Be thankful and filled with joy. It might appear horrific and daunting at times, but recognize our loving God created that situation specifically for you. Through that situation, you can correct what is wrong, build for the future, strengthen your relationship with God, and take control of your lives instead of being bulldozed over by it. 2. God commands Adam and Eve to cultivate the garden. Whatever situation comes our way, it is our job to cultivate and grow. When forces like poverty, illness, or even good things like financial success enter our lives, we must not become a slave to that force. Whatever comes our way, good or bad, do as God commands. Living according to His commandments is how we cultivate our garden. Once we recognize God has created the circumstances in which we live, the next step is to follow His commands. Listen for His voice through scripture or sermons or prayer, and do as He says. This is how we take control. 3. God commands Adam and Eve to keep the garden. We must protect our garden. Keeping our garden means to push back against powers trying to infiltrate and take control of our garden. These forces come from society, worldly powers, and devilish schemes. It can also come from inside, evil thoughts, selfish desires, and unholy words. Regardless of where these forces originate, internally or externally, we must ward off these intruders. We must protect and keep our garden safe by foiling the devil's scheme at every corner. We recognize God has created the situation we live in. We do as He commands. And then we protect the garden by playing defense against the powers trying to pollute our garden. 4. God says to Adam and Eve, "But from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat." Another way to take control of our lives and to safeguard our garden is to avoid what God says not to eat. We fail and lose control when we take that job, money, and item God forbids. We lose control when we do the very things God tells us not to do. When we think something or someone will give us joy, despite knowing it will displease God, the devil is already at work. Be wary. Once we recognize God has created our life situation, we listen and obey. We protect ourselves from evil, and we avoid at all cost what God forbids. 5. God says, "From any tree of the garden you may eat freely." We turn away intruders, avoid what God commands not to eat, and we eat freely from within the sphere of what God permits. Next to forbidden relationships, bad thoughts, and dirty money, Sit good relationships, thoughts, and money that please God. We are one thought, one act away from something that is good. Of all the things we can do in the world that exists within God's permitted domain, why must we stray outside this boundary and jump down a muddy hole infested with sin? Eat freely from any tree. Do the things God permits. Avoid what God says to avoid, and partake in what God says to enjoy. As we face these turbulent times, it's easy to lose control and feel helpless. Use adversity and these unprecedented times as an opportunity to take control of your life. Remember, the very situation you sit in is your Garden of Eden. God placed you there for a reason. He has a plan for you. Instead of complicating matters, simplify your life. Obey His commands. Protect yourself from intruders. Avoid what God forbids. Partake in what God allows. If we do these things, we take control of our lives and flourish in our own Garden of Eden. Thank you, and for more lessons, please visit our site at www.godfirstpec.com. See you next time.